on Republic TV, perhaps for the first time, the Chinese mouthpiece, Jinping, saying in a very detailed profile of Xi Jinping that he spearheaded tactical planning. And it's a big admission by China ahead of Xi Jinping's possible elevation, or at least setting the stage for a possible elevation. Let's go across to Abhishek joining us on the phone line. Abhishek, going through the details of what was said. And I'm reading out the quote. Xi spearheaded strategic and tactical planning, finding solutions to the China-India border conflicts, which means he was perhaps directly involved in escalating tensions, because certainly there hasn't been any concrete de-escalation yet.
Well, absolutely, Niranjan. In fact, till now we have had a conjecture of whether at what level this planning happened. It was obviously planning given the scale of mobilization the Chinese did, but then we thought that perhaps there was a new general who wanted to kind of earn some brownie points with Beijing or the Central Military Commission, or whether there was some meeting at the Central Military Commission, which is headed by Xi Jinping, but perhaps some generals did it, some chain of command at mid-level did it. But then now, with this document, which is profile of Xi Jinping by the Jinhua on the eve of the 6th plenary session of the 19th CPC, which is the Central Committee of and the Congress of the Chinese Communist Party, I think this is a very important disclosure, because this puts the onus and responsibility, or actually the ownership of all military maneuvers at the line of actual control, and indeed at other Chinese international borders at the doorstep of Xi Jinping personally, which means almost like a Thucydides complex which Xi Jinping has in terms of going to war perhaps, or trying to provoke war. We have seen the kind of statements that are coming in from China on Taiwan, for example, over the last 1 month. This is clear now that whatever has happened in terms of breaking all agreements which were in place since early 1990s to keep peace at the unmarked, undemarcated borders between India and China, that has been undone. The tranquility has been disturbed because Xi Jinping had a certain design. Perhaps the next Chinese document would come out of that also. But this particular document, which is a biography of Xi Jinping on the eve of the 6th plenary of the 19th CPC Central Committee, which is going to happen soon, I think ownership of all the military maneuvers clearly show that the Chinese perhaps are not interested in peace.
Yes. And if you look back at the chronology of what's been going on, Abhishek, look back at what's been happening, right from Doklam, right, from 2017, to the Pangong Lake face-off, to the Galwan clashes, to China's conflict with Taiwan, to the tension with Japan, the face-off with Australia, and the diplomatic tension with America, the COVID warfare. It's all been almost playing to a plan, and the plan is culminating next week when they're meeting for the plenary session, where they're saying there will be historic decisions and announcements made before Xi Jinping is possibly elevated.
You are absolutely right, Niranjan. This is essentially a build-up to making Xi Jinping the president for life. He already has an extra term, and this is by design. So essentially what we're seeing is that the militaristic posture the Chinese state has, or the Communist Party of China has adopted over the last few years, is by design to prop up and to sustain the leadership of Xi Jinping to the exclusion of rest of the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. I think there would be some introspection perhaps in among other leaders as to whether this should be allowed, because this really puts China in a bad light. It earns them enmity of every neighbor. I mean, there is no neighbor of the Chinese with whom they have no problem. I mean, for God's sake, who fights with the Bhutanese? I mean, it's a small, tiny country, all peace-loving people, and the Chinese have problem with them as well. And they're having border disputes with them. So I think this document, by way of a biography of Xi Jinping, really is a giveaway in terms of give the peep into the mindset of the present leadership held by Xi Jinping. And at least so far as the LAC maneuvers are concerned, this is clearly a machination.
Abhishek, stay with me. Getting in a quick reaction. Sushant Sareen is, I think, joining us on the phone line. Sushant, we have this profile, very detailed profile of Xi Jinping published by Xinhua ahead of that critical meeting next week where his party would meet to perhaps elevate him. But one thing that stands out, Sriram Cholia and Sushant Sareen are on the phone line. Let me go across Sushant Sareen first. Sushant, it mentions that he but it says Xi has spearheaded strategic and tactical planning and if necessary personal intervention, including of the military kind, finding solutions to China-India border conflicts. It's perhaps for the first time that they're acknowledging that Xi Jinping was personally involved in giving orders to whatever was happening at the LAC.
So look, one, I don't think he was trying to find any solutions to the border issues. I think he was trying to muddy the border issues even more than what they already were. And he has fouled up relations with a number of countries because of the kind of stand he has taken. But I think I'm not surprised by these revelations because it is inconceivable that a general of the PLA, howsoever senior he might be, would take an initiative of the sorts which was taken last year on the LAC, almost leading to some kind of a military standoff. There was a military standoff, of course, but it could have escalated into something much worse. And to think that just a general of the PLA would do this on his own or, this was a series of things which just spiraled out of control, I don't think that was the case. And I don't think anybody who looks at China with some degree of seriousness was ready to buy into that narrative that, these are just a series of accidents or that, it was just something which happened along the line of actual control. It was a tactical level maneuver. It wasn't. Very clearly it wasn't. So if this admission or mea culpa, if you want to call it, is now being officially aired by the Chinese, it's good for academics who can, annotate their analysis with this particular write-up. But otherwise, people who are into public policy already suspected that this was the case. So no surprises out there. But to say that he's looking for solutions, I don't think he's looking for solutions. I think he's looking for trouble.
Yeah. Sriram, you want to respond to that? Or add to that?
Well, Niranjan, the first thing is Xi Jinping is a political animal out and out, and he wants to consolidate his power beyond the norm of 2 terms. And next year he's got a big Congress coming up where he will be anointed for a 3rd or potentially even 4th successive terms. He wants to be president for life. So clearly he has taken this prestige in foreign policy vis-a-vis all the neighboring countries, vis-a-vis the US, vis-a-vis Taiwan, vis-a-vis South China Sea, all the so-called sensitive issues for China. He wants to brag about it and to show that he has really led the country from the front. He has changed the foreign policy in the last 2 terms and he deserves more and more terms. So I think he will continue to be assertive. But the fact that they have changed so many theater command leaders from the PLA in the Western Command in the last 2 years, nearly 2 years since the crisis began with India, shows that he also realizes that they have not gotten what they were looking for. They were expecting many more gains. They were expecting India to cave in. They were expecting to try and dominate and to compel India to accept their version of the LAC. Narendra Modi government, nationalistic to the core, did not allow them to get away with this kind of aggression. We have pushed them back from Galwan, we have pushed them back from Pangong Tso, we pushed them back from Gogra Hot Springs. Demchok and Depsang remain, but we are resolute and we are not giving 1 inch. So I think this report, which says that he is looking for solutions, to me it suggests that Xi Jinping initially wanted to do grandstanding because that will show to the inner party circles that nobody better than him to lead the foreign policy and to lead glory to China and to, to completely browbeat all the neighbors. That was his initial intention last year. Now that it is not succeeding with India, he may well look for some kind of a breakthrough. There are some of these Chinese analysts saying that Xi Jinping may want to meet Prime Minister Modi and look for some kind of a face-saving exit from this long crisis where 60,000 troops are mobilized on both sides, and the Chinese are not able to make any headway or breakthrough. And I think that's the thing that has political connotations. He will want to try and find some kind of a quote-unquote solution or end game to this long crisis with India before his anointing as the next, to continue as the president and as the Communist Party chief. So we should be looking out for these signals. Ultimately, the Chinese military, like Sushant is saying and like most analysts agree, is not autonomous. They're completely under the Communist Party's rule and control. And Xi Jinping is a totalitarian. He is like monopolized authority. So he can actually make things move on the ground. He can make them dismantle their bunkers and these so-called dual-use villages and step back. The PLA can step back. So I think that is something to watch out for. And this report does hold out some hope that maybe they have seen the folly of what they did. And maybe Xi Jinping realized, especially that this was a misadventure that backfired for him, and he would want some kind of calm on the border before his next political coronation.
Yeah, just stay with me. I have very little time. Getting in the last word from Colonel Rohit Dev as well. Colonel Rohit Dev, what do you make of it? This admission that's coming in. In fact, we had a show lined up today about the 10 military developments vis-a-vis China and what's going on around the world. And there's only one culmination, that of Xi Jinping's elevation. The conflict doctrine has been proven.
Yes, you're right, Niranjan. In fact, at 68 years of age, and Xi Jinping, if you look at the Chinese strategy, which is a giveaway right now, which was also in the DOD report of 2020, which says very clearly, and let me quote this one because quoting is better than, making a story here. Chinese strategy seeks to, achieve the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation by 2049, unquote. If you see this quote, this is something like, taking Xi Jinping to his, deathbed while being the premier of China. And around this line of great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation by 2049, this person has been able to create efforts not only in the economic realm, but more towards the diplomatic realm. And that is what Sriram was alluding to seek some kind of a diplomatic, achievement there. And whether you see their overseas deployment from 2019, whatever they have done, Doklam, post-Doklam, what they did in Galwan, in South China Sea, and the growing, unrest towards Australia, Ford, and other formats of world alliances, you will see that China is actually playing up to the larger gallery of the Chinese population just to retain Xi at the helm of affairs. And it's all coming around. It's all coming around, whether it's projection of power through naval forces, with the nuclear deterrence. You can go on and see how things have unfolded in the last 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
And Xi is uncomfortable. And after the pandemic, in which the world also saw through the entire, not only the virus part, they also saw through how, as a developing nation, China, sort of fudged the WTO requirements to grow as an economy. And on the sidelines also grew as a military, component. So China is today at a very, I can say a very sort of a precarious situation. Because at one end, there is a scope for China to grow more than its stature currently. But on the other hand, by retaining people like Xi Jinping and with the policies which are more outdated and antagonistic to the Committee of Nations, I think they can't strike a balance now. And this is one last attempt and also kind of a showcasing to prove that, okay, he's the leader only. And if you see it, dispassionately, actually you see nobody else. You don't see an uprising in China happening just short of his getting elevated. So it's just a posturing. And coming to the tactical part, I think it's a very cheap stunt because, we all know China's polity and military have been organizationally very well connected right through. So obviously, a stage like Doklam or the stage like Galwan and beyond obviously has to have the blessings of the Chinese premier. And when we see our country, the response has been much more universally, quite a good response, wherein the MEA, the decision makers in the Prime Minister's office, the military have all conjoined for the first time, and that happened, I think, after the 8th or 9th round of talks by the four commanders. Okay. And I think from there on, India is able to see the diplomatic and the economic stunts of China much more clearly.
And obviously the military is aligned to, take on the LAC challenges, if any.
Thank you all, Rohitdev,
definitely.
Sriram Cholia and Sushant. Have to take a short break now. Top focus at 9 p.m. Looking at it very, very closely. What China has been trying to do in the last 3 to 4 years.